Welcome back into the Big Trail Show, and welcome into another Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. Kevin, we might be months and months away, it seems, from basketball season, but this team, and more importantly, at this moment, with what we're going to talk about, scheduling is starting to take shape here for the Razorbacks, and some really, really exciting matchups coming up. We're going to start with the conference slate, and then we'll head over to the non-con slate that,
Mm.
as you know, we were joking before hopping on here, it's like they're playing an NBA schedule with all the teams they've got in the non-con. But we begin with the conference matchups. The first thing that stood out to me, Kevin, was they somehow, and they explained it, I get the math of it all, but they somehow botched the Kentucky home and home slam dunk that you think would be there for Arkansas and Kentucky. But regardless, what were your takeaways from getting the home and away kind of splits here for Arkansas's SEC schedule in the upcoming season?
Well, first of all, what you said, Arkansas, Kentucky, it is malpractice that these teams aren't playing a home and away. I'm old, so I still refer to it as home and away.
Yeah.
You could say home and home all you want. We're saying the same thing, but you need to play that team twice. The fact that you only get them once, at least after going to Rupp last year, Cal's return, Calipari and the Hogs get Kentucky and Mark Pope in Bud Walton Arena. That place will be nuts. That's the most important game on the schedule again this year. Back-to-back seasons, that's how I see it. Whether Kentucky's ranked higher than some of the other murderers row on the schedule that Arkansas has. But the home and away, you still have LSU and Missouri. As you know, they're kind of the permanent home and away opponents every year. Whatever. But Auburn, if you're not going to get Kentucky, Auburn's not a bad way to roll in terms of just the quality of the matchup. The defending outright regular season SEC champs, a Final Four team. And even though there's a lot of players being replaced for the Tigers, it's still a team that's going to come in, I think, with preseason top 15 rankings. We'll see where they are once league play rolls around. But to me, it's Kentucky, the home and away with Auburn. And then you know that game on the road against Florida. You're only playing Florida once. The Gators, the defending national champions, the defending SEC tournament champions, and they'll have Boogie Fland leading the way in the backcourt. Brought all those studs back in the front court, kind of starting over from scratch in the backcourt. But Boogie Fland's a great way to start, an all-league kind of guy before he got hurt at Arkansas. So you're going to be paying close attention to the head-to-heads with guys like him and Darius Acup Jr., DJ Wagner when that game plays out. You're going to get Tennessee at home.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get Texas at home. I think both of those teams will be preseason top 25. And then on the road, in addition to Florida, you've got Alabama and Ole Miss. And so Alabama probably top 15, top 20. I don't know if Ole Miss will be preseason ranked. They probably should be. It's Chris Beard, and that's a strong basketball program. But when you look up and down, it's the SEC by far the best conference in the history of college basketball. That's not Is that overstating things? I mean, I know you're a
No,
Big Ten guy, but I don't think so. It
no, no, no,
absolutely
no.
was 14 teams out of
Yeah.
16 to the NCAA tournament. You had four of those teams make the Elite Eight. You made up half the Final Four, and you got the national champion. So maybe it won't be as strong. We don't know. It's going to be hard to match, let alone top what happened last year. But it's probably going to be the best conference in college basketball perception wise coming in. Then rubber meets the road when teams start playing in non-conference and we see everything play out. But when you look at the conference schedule alone, having said all that, it's going to be a bunch of ranked teams, a bunch of quad one win opportunities, home and away for the Razorbacks. We just highlighted the headliners, but it's going to be another brutal 18 game slate. And I can't wait to see the playing dates come
Yeah.
out for these games because that's where we know how tough they are, but what are those brutal back to back road swings? Where are those two games at home where you're thinking, oh, we can catch our breath here. You just can't do that in the SEC anymore.
Yeah, it's a great point from the standpoint that, you know, we talked about that a lot last year where, it is going to be what it is. When you play in the SEC, your schedule is going to be hard just based off of the quality of the opponents that you have. But it does in a lot of ways, it shapes the way your season goes, where those stretches have. It was for Arkansas, it ended up kind of catapulting them forward. But that stretch where you were on the road and you had Kentucky February 1st, and then you had to turn around, you had to go to Texas, and all of these different things. You both have to find the lulls of where maybe you could take advantage. And there was a swing where Arkansas had LSU and Missouri back to back, etc. But then there are stretches where no matter how they do this, and it'll be more fair for some teams, and some fan bases will get mad and say theirs is worse than the others. It is the stretches that can kind of beat you down and can shape your season in a lot of different ways, depending on where you have those road swings or back to back really crazy opponents on your schedule.
Last year, we thought that A&M then Auburn road swing was just brutal,
Yeah.
and Arkansas had its chances to win both games. That's a salute to Calipari and how he got things turned around, but it's also a salute to the league that you put your best foot forward and you still couldn't come up with the dub. So yeah, there are going to be stretches where you're looking at it going, even as good as Arkansas could be, there's times there's gonna be uncertainty, and I think that goes across the league for the top teams in the program. Arkansas will be expected coming into preseason top 2 or 3 projected in this league. And here's something else about scheduling and the dates that are important. When you start talking about having Kentucky at home, having Auburn at home, having Tennessee at home, some of these matchups, Texas on your home court in Bud Walton Arena in league play, those are opportunities if you get them on Saturdays to get recruits in for visits. That's going to be important in November in some of these marquee games, non-conference we'll probably talk about here shortly, December, but also during the meat of SEC play. How many of those games are on Saturday where you're not only jacking and juicing up the energy inside Bud Walton Arena, but it makes it easier for you to get players in because they're going through their high school seasons playing games on Tuesdays and Fridays, and then those Saturday games are the ones you're kind of earmarking to maybe get them on campus. So even recruiting is impacted by how the conference schedule falls.
Scheduling in general just plays, to your point, with visits, such a massive role in recruiting in general. And let's
Mm.
talk a little bit about that non con schedule because obviously you want to get guys in for marquee matchups like you're talking about. And I think I made a comment to you, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago where I said, hey, I really would like to see some marquee matchups in Bud Walton Arena. We didn't really get a lot of non-con marquee matchups for Arkansas a year ago, and somebody must have taken that personally because it sounds like hyperbole, it sounds like exaggeration, but Arkansas is playing every member of the 2025 Elite Eight in the non-conference schedule. So let's talk about the SEC slate is going to be tough as it is, but we are going to know so much about this Arkansas team by the time they get to the SEC play in kind of a way that we didn't last year when we still had a lot of questions about what this team was going to look like. We saw flashes against Michigan. We saw flashes in other spots, but hey, what is this team really going to look like? When
Yeah.
you talk about playing Duke, Houston, Louisville, Baylor, Michigan State, and pretty much everybody else good in college basketball, we are going to have an idea of what this team looks like with all of its returning production by the time the SEC slate rolls around.
Yeah, and last week we found out because Calipari's, his loose lips don't sink ships; they launch ships. He's talking at Crystal Bridges and leaks out the next game in Dallas. Texas Tech is going to be a top 10 rated team. They got the $4 million man, JT Toppin.
Yeah.
They got Christian Anderson back, a guy that can fill it up in the backcourt. And you're playing that team in Dallas on December 10th, which is a Saturday. Speaking of Saturday, you can't bring in visitors. The following Saturday, excuse me, December 13th. I misspoke. That's a Saturday. The following Saturday, you're in Brooklyn to play Houston. And then in December 3rd, you're hosting Louisville at Bud Walton Arena. All these teams are going to be top 15, if not better, inside the top 10 when we look at just the preseason rankings. They get a road game against Michigan State. We don't know the date of that. The defending Big Ten champion. And oh, by the way, a Big East, or excuse me, an Elite Eight team, as was Texas Tech, as was Tennessee, as was, who am I leaving out from the, it's like
Florida,
the entire
Houston.
final.
Yeah, Florida, Houston, everybody. Yeah,
Alabama.
yeah.
You're playing Alabama, Tennessee, Michigan State, Texas Tech. Those were all Elite Eight teams. The other 4 Elite Eight teams went to the Final Four. You're defending your national champion, Florida. Your runner-up, Houston. Duke, who Arkansas will play in Chicago on Thanksgiving Day, November 27th. And Auburn, who we know Arkansas is going to play twice. So and then not only that, but you've got Kentucky and Ole Miss, and you're only playing those teams once. Those were Sweet 16 teams. Arkansas obviously was a Sweet 16 team. So when you add up the total of games, non-conference and conference, you have 11 games against 10 teams that advanced to the at least the second weekend, and then the 4 that advanced to the final weekend. I mean, that's insane. That's a murderer's row on your schedule, and I think it says a lot about John Calipari's confidence in what he has. We have looked at him historically. He speaks about this. Don't judge us based on what we do early, but how we finish and how we come together. And so there are going to be challenges for a blueprint like that. You think with the retention they have, with most of the playable two deep is really veteran guys, even the two they got out of the portal frontline guys. You hope for some success, obviously, in the non-conference, and that you start better in SEC play. But they're going to be battle tested going to the SEC this year. Last year, they just didn't play. They had 3 of those marquee games. The ACC SEC Challenge, Miami opponent was not very good.
Mhm.
That was a tough game, and Arkansas had to pull that out. Not a great team though. And they had kind of 3 cream puffs finishing up December, most of that month, leading into league play. Now you look in December, you're playing the Louisville team that's going to be top 2, them and Duke. Arkansas is playing the top 2 teams in that league. By the way, I left out Baylor. That'll be a home game as well. Didn't even mention Baylor. They may not be ranked top 25 preseason, but we know one of the powers of the Big 12. But in December alone, what we know right now is the ACC SEC Challenge early in the month. We mentioned Texas Tech and then Houston on the 20th. So you're getting some really big, tough challenges where you're not sure who's going to be favored even going into those games leading into the SEC, which will begin again in early January. And so I think even though Arkansas's got a tougher non-con, they're also playing some of these tough matchups as a lead up or on the doorstep of SEC play.
Yeah, it is going to test this team in a whole lot of different ways, but I think it's a great point on it. It shows confidence in this group and it shows confidence in a roster building strategy that we really, quite frankly, haven't seen from John Calipari. John Rothstein had the returning scoring percentages the other day for the SEC, and at the top would be
Yeah.
Arkansas with 45%, which is not a roster building strategy. Number one that we've seen many times. But Arkansas continuing to put together that 25-26 roster with a couple new pieces as well. We will get to those after we take a quick break. All right, back here on the Hog Hoops Report, Kevin McPherson and Jacob Morris with you. Kevin, we covered the schedule, the roster coming together as well. It's been 2 weeks since we've chatted, and the Hogs making a couple international moves in the process. The first being just a massive human being, and Elmir Jovic. The Hogs add a center of the type of, he reminds me of like the Mark Gasol body type, just an immovable object you described him as, but another front court piece added for the Hogs, and the first of 2 in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, Bosnian, 6'11", 7 feet, 265 pounds. I look at him as more of a developmental piece. It gives you added size to a front line that, really goes 3 deep. But I don't know if this is a guy that's going to be plugging in and playing a whole lot in terms of sort of that 4th answer on your front line with a regular role. I think it's more developmental, maybe long term. But in emergency, if you have the kind of attrition, I mean, this is somebody that can come in and he's got 5 fouls he can give you. When you start talking about a space eater, even if they're maybe not your preferred option, it can impact how other teams have to
Yep.
play when you get somebody that big, just simply that big. And
Yeah.
again, can be a physical addition. When you watch highlights of Jovic, mostly around the basket craft, when you look at him offensively, not the most explosive guy, not the quickest of foot. And so, I'm interested to see if he plays, how much he plays. And then when you get into the SEC with a different kind of player than he has seen, sort of playing at the second division level in the Bosnian and over professionally overseas, how much of a difference and shock to the system that is for him. And again, I don't know what kind of role to expect necessarily for him out of the gates. I suspect it'll be on the outside looking in, the top 2 deep rotation. Right now, Arkansas goes 8 deep that way, the way I see it.
Yeah, it's an interesting ad, and I think developmental is what comes to mind to your point about a guy that has a lot of intrigue and could be used in different cases. But in terms of this season, it'll be just interesting, and I think kind of injury dependent also, depending on how much time he sees. A different type of center in a big way would be Paulo Semedo, the high school ad, international as well, but more or he was top 50 right on
Yeah.
ESPN's recruiting rankings, and kind of a late ad, one that came a little bit out of nowhere, but definitely a different type of center when you think 7'1", 220 versus 6'11", 265 or whatever it might be. But again, just kind of stacking front court pieces, developmental, whatever you want to put it as. Depth is something that Arkansas is adding, and that's something that obviously the Hogs struggled with a little bit due to injury last year.
Yeah, that's right. And 7'1", 225
Yeah.
with a 7'5" or greater wingspan. I've seen it reported. I had one source tell me it's closer to 7'8".
Jeez.
And you mentioned it. ESPN ranks him the 50th best player. On Three Sports has him ranked 49th, a four-star. But he was, kind of obviously in a late edition. He had some other
Yeah.
schools at one point or another that were interested. When you look, he played at West Oaks in Orlando, Florida, and he had
Mhm.
programs like Florida State, Miami. So you had some Florida flavor there in terms of some interest for him. But again, kind of a back end of your situation of your roster. Similar to Javich, not similar players, but similar in terms of what we project might be their impact in year one. So, and this guy's more of a stretch, could be a 4 or 5, even at 7'1", could maybe be on the court with another big. And he's got a little bit of skill, a little ability to put the ball on the deck and drive a little bit. He'll pull up and shoot some threes. And again, this is depth on the front line, like you mentioned. So you look at these two additions, and it's not necessarily that you need them to fit into your top two rotation, but what if you got to a point where you just need them for a few minutes, period?
Yeah.
And this is more. This would be true. This would be front line. Maybe we'll call it emergency playable depth, whereas they did not have that last year. Outside of Big Z, Jonas Adu, and Trevor in Brazil, and we'll throw Thero in as a forward. He was a four, but outside we know he went down. But outside of those guys, they didn't really have an answer in those last six players outside the top nine. They were all guard sized, and they were
Mhm.
all kind of walk on level quality where they were never going to really play or help you. We don't know yet what these guys will bring to the table, but maybe there's more to it with them where if you had a need in a pinch to get through a half or get through a game or get through a situation, maybe you could run one or both of those guys out there.
Yeah, it's just depth in a way that Arkansas struggled with a year ago. We don't have to hit it over and over and over again. For you, obviously, it's going to be really flexible on roles for these guys. What do you kind of see as the best case scenario for each of them in terms of what role they might play for the Hogs next year?
Yeah. I think the one that's probably got the better chance of playing is
Yeah.
Semedo, because he can play some at the four, and you really only have one of those.
Yeah.
Last year you had two in Thero and Brazil. Now you've just got Brazil. We know Brazil can get in foul trouble. As good as he was in the last 9 games, he's also had injury issues. So to me, I think Arkansas is going to, by committee, have backup play at the four spot. You're going to see Carter Knox some playing with another wing and two guards and a big. He'll do a little bit of that. We may see some of Nick Pringle and Malik Ewan on the court together, your two main players at the five spot. We may see some of that, but we also might see a guy like Samedo get a few little opportunities here and there just to see what that looks like. And again, of the two, he's the one that probably helps you with a need a little bit more than maybe Javich, who is your third center. And I think outside of just saying it that way, we know Brazil can play the 4-5. He
Mhm.
can help at the five, and I think we'll see him helping at the five before we'll see Javich. So effectively, he's your fourth center. Semedo could factor in as, even if it's your third option at the four, it puts him a little closer to getting on the court than maybe Javich when you just look at it from a number standpoint and depth or lack of depth, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, regardless, I think Razorback fans have to be really excited about this roster construction, just in terms
Yeah.
of the retention piece. Again, not to hit it over and over and over again, but to lead the SEC in returning scoring with a team that made it to the to the Sweet 16 a year ago, adding the portal commitments that they did in Ewan and Pringle, and then adding depth pieces as well. It's going to be a really exciting season, and I think the hype for this team is just going to continue to build. But Coach Cal and the coaching staff staying busy on the recruiting trail as well. We will talk a little bit about that, but first, one final break and a message from our sponsors. Back here and wrapping up shop on the Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. Kevin, we teased it a little bit before the break there, but regardless of all of the Arkansas scheduling news, all of the Arkansas roster construction news, the Hogs staying busy on the recruiting trail as well. Coach Cal in Kansas City, Coach Martin in Philadelphia, staying busy and keeping tabs on a whole lot of recruits as Arkansas continues to try to keep the momentum rolling in that category.
Well, interestingly enough, one of the players that Calipari was out to see in Kansas City was future Hog, five-star future Hog, J.J. Andrews, the 6'6" wing, pushing 6'7" at a Little Rock Christian Academy. This was a scholastic live eval weekend all over the country, different events. The one in Kansas City, the Midwest Showcase. And Calipari at every live eval opportunity, the first one being being in Memphis, where I was as well, for the Nike EYBL session back in May. Then it was MBPA Top 100 camp. There were 2 days of live eval specifically for that camp. Only that camp allowed by the NCAA about a week ago. And then you mentioned this weekend at the Midwest Showcase, Calipari was there. So he's been courtside to see J.J. Andrews through these 3 events I just mentioned. So every opportunity you're thinking, well, that's a player Arkansas already has committed. What about other guys they're pursuing? Well, that's part of the plan there too. He wasn't just there to see JJ. I think it's important to understand though, when you prioritize a player, it doesn't just stop when you get their commitment. Signing periods in November, you're all in with that player. And so I think it's important that Calipari in these opportunities is there to support him, but also Calipari on hand to see another class of 2026 wing, another 6'7" guy out of Owasso, Oklahoma, has been on Arkansas's campus multiple times for unofficial visits. Jalen Montnati, a sniper, a shooter. If you talk about wing and you're talking what J.J. Andrews is just a slasher. He's adding to his three-point game and some of that perimeter skill, but a really blue-collar kind of guy. But he would a perfect complement would be a guy like Montnati, who is again, a sniper from distance, one of those volume three-point shooters. Every shot looks like it's going in. So Calipari there to see him as well and his Owasso team out of Oklahoma compete. And then in-state class of 2028. Here we go, another in-state guy. We know Calipari was laser focused on adding guys like Seeley and then later Andrews. But class of 2028, Anthony Spratt Jr., a 6'5" guard out of Benton. He helped Benton as a freshman, a loaded Benton team, win the 5A state title back in March. And he is with Benton again this weekend at that same Midwest Showcase. And Calipari, Arkansas started asking me about him earlier in the week. Calipari then courtside to see him play as well on Friday night in the same showcase. Another name from the in-state. We talk about how rich the talent is, how rich the state is in basketball talent. Well, here's another name. We start looking ahead. Recruiting is always present and future, but it's also the past. Because when you talk about what Calipari did this week doing the car wash with some of the national guys on McAfee, he was talking about his recruiting strategy with some guys and talking about pointing to the fact he's got his players in the NBA, their contracts total, what, $6 billion? $6 billion? Are you kidding me? So recruiting is always about present, future, and past. Because when you're recruiting, you've got to point to what your track record is, and you support that. That's why we see Calipari attending NBA games when he can, including these finals he's been to. But it's amazing when I look at just the work that coaches do on the road.
But that's going to do it for this week's Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. We will be back to talk to you next week. More Pig Trail Show coming up on the other side of the break.